today no introduction, anything, nothing.
So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third meeting of the Economic Commission. Today we will review and approve the draft reports of the last two meetings. The draft report of the first meeting was posted on the Assembly website, and it's numbered 579. The draft reports of the second meeting of the Economic Commission were posted on the 29th, so yesterday, and they're numbered 580, 602, 610, I'm sorry, 610, and 611. In reviewing these draft reports, I urge you to focus exclusively on whether the reports correctly reflect key points that were made during the discussions and the conclusions. The review of the reports is not an opportunity to reopen the discussions on any of the agenda items or to address any new items. To avoid spending time on discussing editorial matters such as typos or translation discrepancies, if you have such changes, please send them directly to the Secretariat at the email address shown right here at the front, and the Secretariat will make the necessary corrections and align the translations. So today we will be able to project on both screens, as you see, the documents. And we will use the Word format, so that will allow us to zoom in and increase the size font if we need to. And especially for delegates at the back, if you have problems reading, please let us know right away, and we will increase the font. So I think that will help the discussion today. So we will begin with working paper 579, which includes the report of the general section on agenda item 31, the annual reports of the Council to the Assembly. We will review the draft report section by section. So let's begin with the general section, paragraphs 1 to 3. Are there any comments? Very well. Next section, agenda and working arrangements, paragraphs 4 and 5. Are there any comments? Moving on to agenda item 31, annual report. Paragraphs 31.1 to 31.3. Are there any comments? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 32. Section on liberalization and ICAO international agreements. Are there any comments with respect to any of the paragraphs from 32.1 to 32.10? Thank you. Paragraphs 32.11, we had some proposed changes that came from European states, and they are shown on the screen. Are there any comments? Singapore, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to request to go back to 32.9. We have submitted some changes to Secretariat that was not reflected here. We'd like to reflect as co-sponsors of the paper Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos PDR, Marshall Islands, Nauru, New Zealand, North Macedonia, Palau, Thailand, and Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you. That's perfectly acceptable. Going back to 32.11, are there any comments on this paragraph and in particular the suggested changes? I see no country wanting to provide comments, so these track changes will be adopted. Any comments on paragraphs 32.12 to 32.16? Thank you. 32.17. We had a change requested by the United Arab Emirates, and also we inserted a comment from Germany, as shown on the screen. Are there any comments? United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In working paper 579, in regard to paragraph 3217, the United Arab Emirates respectively proposed to end the paragraph at, quote, "This task which should be reflect the need to resolve prior outstanding issues," and unquote, and delete the rest of the sentence. The reason is prior to outstanding issue to be resolved before the panel were regulatory oversight and free ride concern only. Number two, additionally, the ATRB 15 report in the conclusion paragraph 321, Part A did not specify the remaining outstanding issue. Number three, Mr. Chairman, this is further reflected in working paper 610. Page A6, paragraph 6, quote, requested the Council to address the remaining issue of concern, unquote, where it does not specify what the remaining issue are. Therefore, we respectively propose the deletion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And may I ask Germany to provide its perspective, please?
From our point of view, it's important to remain these open issues because they were discussed in the ATRP, and I think it's important that we discuss them further. They won't be in the papers yet, but I think it helps to clarify which issues are open. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just forwarded to the Secretariat some textual suggestions regarding 32.17 from the Member States of ECAC, which I believe should address the comments made by Germany, and actually I would suggest also address the concerns expressed by the United Arab Emirates. Thank you.
Thank you. With your indulgence, we will just look at the proposed text from ECAC, so bear with me. We will put that new text on the screen so that everybody can see it. The text is now on the screen. I'll give you a few minutes to read it. So thank you, CAC, for this constructive proposal. I assume all of the CAC members are would support this language. Are there any comments from the floor? I may ask United Arab Emirates to indicate support or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, we are have the same support. We don't feel that this issue coming along with this statement. Thank you.
Just to clarify, you support this new language or you do not?
No, Your Excellency, we will maintain our position, and we see that those issues shouldn't be entered in this statement.
Guyana, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Would like to say that we understand and appreciate the intervention by the UAE. However, We are in favor of keeping the listed outstanding issues for the simple reason this report ends up outside of people who don't attend the ATRP. And for that reason, to list them would be very helpful. So our submission would be to keep the issues as listed. In that regard, we note and support the comment made by Germany. Thank you.
Okay, so the purpose of this report is to capture the discussions that took place in the first and the second meeting. It's not to discuss outstanding issues that are still alive in another forum, such as the ATRP. So the specific concerns, a specific list of issues was mentioned on the floor. So this has to be captured. We can also capture the fact that some states think that those issues should no longer be discussed elsewhere. So if you give me 1 second, or more than 1 second, 1 minute, we will make a further change to the language proposed by ICAO, and I'd like to get your comments on this. So just bear with us a moment. So given the discussion we just had, as the chairperson, I propose the following, which I think is a statement of fact. So if you could read the new text as is underlined in red. So I'll take comments now. United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. United Arab Emirates stress again the conclusion in the ATRB 15 report, and this report not capture the remaining outstanding issue, Mr. Chairman. We reiterate our position to not list these issues. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Bahrain.
شكرا سعادة الرئيس. مملكة البحرين تتفق على اقتراح دولة.
Thank you very much, sir. We support the UAE position. Thank you.
Thank you. United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the point that my friend from the UAE is making, but I mean, I would point out that this is a report on proceedings in this commission, and these issues were discussed at this commission. By the way, can I also, since I've got the microphone, ask you to make that text bigger, because I certainly can't read it still.
We can certainly do that now.
Thank you.
Give me a thumbs up when it's big enough.
Margin. I know that. I just pressed. Yes.
No. Yep. Right there. Looks good. Saudi Arabia.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. ترى المملكة العربية.
Thank you very much, sir. Wow, it's pretty early to be getting into this level of detail, but let's just say that we support the UAE position. Thank you.
Thank you. Austria.
Thank you. We think your proposal, the new one, is seems to be quite reflecting what we talked now, except this expression inter alia might not be there, or might include that there might be additional issues. This wasn't brought forward, when I recall correctly. Therefore, I would suppose leaving it, issues include fair competition and delete inter alia. And also, I haven't in my report that Germany mentioned, or during their intervention, environmental protection. Therefore, I would also be happy if this part is deleted.
Since we're discussing what Germany said, does Germany agree with that?
I agree with Austria. It's right. We did mention environmental protection, and inter alia can be deleted as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I agree with those two suggestions. Let's delete inter alia and environmental. United Kingdom.
Thank you. I very much agree with the comments made by Germany and Austria, but I would make a drafting point in the preceding sentence, which is a rather strange formulation, where it says, in terms of the time frame for finalising this task, which should reflect the need to da-da-da-da. We don't have a time frame for finalising this task. I mean, the point here is that in order to be able to finalise this task, some states considered that there were outstanding issues, and they included.
Does this work for the UK? Does this work for the UK? Yes, thank you. United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United Arab Emirates agreed with the new proposal. Thank you very much. But we respectfully propose to amend another state to be amended to other states.
I agree with that proposal now that we have had intervention from Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, so we should capture this. So it should say some states or other states? Other states. Okay. Thank you very much. So that's, I think, the best we can come up with. Again, taking into account the fact that we're reporting on what was said on the proceedings. I think this is an accurate description. I see no objections, so therefore I close this article. Thank you. Or this paragraph. Are there any comments on paragraph 32.18? Thank you. 32.19. We have some changes proposed by European states. Any comments? These changes are approved. 32.20. Any comments? Thank you. 32.21. We have comments from the European states as well as the United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates. You have the floor. United Arab Emirates, do you need the floor? We're on 32.21. You're fine? United States?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I do have a comment on the European states' change of the word shall to should. My intervention very firmly said must not and will not be binding on non-signatory states, and that needs to be captured. That was a very intentional intervention. It should not be an issue of contention here, I think, since a non-signatory could not be bound at any rate. So I would ask that all agree to go back to shall not. Thank you.
We will keep shall. Any other comments? Very well. Moving on to the consumer protection section. Are there any comments with respect to paragraphs 32.22 to 32.24? Thank you. 32.25, we have some proposed changes from European states. ECI, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make this intervention in relation to paragraph 22.25. I would like to mention that ACI, on behalf of its airport members, made an intervention to state that the airport industry has been proactive in monitoring customer experience and quality of service. We brought to the attention of the Economics Commission that ACI's airport service quality ASQ program is fit for purpose for the oversight of service quality provided to passengers and consumers, as it allows to both closely monitor service quality levels at a single airport over time and in comparison with peer airports. ASQ is present in over 19 countries. We would like this to be reflected in the report as follows. The Commission took note of proactive industry-led initiatives in the field, notably the ACI Airport Service Quality ASQ program as a means to monitor and oversee service quality provided by airport operators to their customers. Please also note that we have already provided the text to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll try to retrieve that text to show it to the room. So the ACI proposed text is now on the screen. I will now entertain comments with respect to this specific proposal. Are there any comments or views? I have the United States and the United Arab Emirates. Are your interventions related to this specific language? Okay. I will only take comments about this language, and then we'll come back to you two afterwards. United Arab Emirates?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on paragraph 32.25, the United Arab Emirates proposed to retain the originally drafted code, go beyond the sharing of state experience.
If you want to just hang on to that thought, we'll just finish with the ACI proposal, and then I'll come back to you on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For this comment. Thank you. Very well. Before we approve this additional language from ACI. United States, you had the floor.
Thank you. My comment was on two other changes in the paragraph. The first is with respect to this notion of mutually recognized good practices. I don't recall that term being used, and I'm not sure what mutually recognized would mean when you're talking about a group of many states. A mutual could be shared between two states. So I think this is really complicating matters. We should stick to what was discussed, which was identifying good practices. We could also suggest best practices, although that's subject to opinion. But let us strike mutually recognized. Also, there were 2 points made. One is that it's premature to go beyond the sharing of state experiences. And the other is that it was premature to discuss a legally binding instrument. These are two separate things, and both should be reflected in this paragraph. Thank you.
Singapore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We agree with the comments by the United States. In addition, I would suggest that for the second last sentence, I think the conclusion was quite clear that any harmonization is not supported, so I don't think we should have the phrase, for example.
Okay. May I ask a member of ICAC to provide an explanation as to the rationale behind identify mutually recognized good practices? Can someone explain the rationale for that language? France?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to all. I'll try to explain this formulation, which is clearer in French. It's clear that the American position recognizes that it's not possible to go towards a legally binding instrument, and that was not the intention. We all agree as well that it's time today to look at how states were able to implement the core principles and exchange on this. The question with this formulation was to see whether it was possible to go a bit beyond an exchange of views to see if things are agreed to consensually. Could we not work on that basis? The objective was to not miss any opportunity, if there was a consensus, of course, to move ahead in this, knowing that it's clear that we wouldn't go as far as implementing a legally binding instrument or some such. The proposal to go beyond the sharing of state experiences seems a bit too limiting given the interest in this discussion, but I recognize that the term isn't simple to find. Anyway, that was the idea. Thank you. Concerning the 3 words, identify, mutually recognized, it seems to me that when we talk about good practices, these are practices that are recognized. Otherwise, they wouldn't be considered good practices. Therefore, I'm not sure if by adding these 3 words, we're adding a lot of value to the text, if we're already talking about good practices. France, what is your viewpoint? Is it essential to add these 3 words? No, I don't think it's essential. I think it's a suggestion. The interest was in an exchange of views, and if that allowed for the emergence of good practices that went beyond. But no, it wasn't essential to keep. Thank you very much.
Is your intervention related to this very point?
Yes, I wanted to thank France for its clarification, and I think it's certainly nice to see whether it's possible to go beyond the exchange of views and see what can be agreed on consensually, but that was really not part of the discussion in our first session of the Economic Commission. So I don't think we should try to stretch this paragraph to include something that really wasn't discussed.
I'm of the view that we should simply say exchange of views and good practices. Are there any strong sentiments or objections to my perspective? No? Okay. So we will remove those three words. Now we're going to the next sentence. However, the Commission considered it premature to go beyond the sharing of state experiences, and the intention is to replace that with to discuss a legally binding instrument. United States, can you maybe restate your comment on that part of the sentence?
Certainly. Thank you. There are two thoughts that were expressed during our discussion. One was that it was premature to go beyond sharing state experiences. The other is that it was premature to discuss a legally binding instrument. These are two very different things. So I do not object to adding the red line, discuss a legally binding instrument, but we should leave in as well that it is premature to go beyond the sharing of state experiences.
Thank you. If we said, if we kept go beyond the sharing of state experiences and added the word or, discuss a legally binding instrument, would that be a good compromise for European states and the United States? And if you don't agree, ask for the floor, otherwise I'll assume you agree with my proposal. Very well, we will add the word or between both notions. We're on the last sentence. Oh, I'm sorry, United Arab Emirates, did you have anything else you wanted to mention about this sentence?
Yes, again, I just say again, Mr. Chairman, that this 3225, we want to quote, go beyond the sharing of state experience, to unquote and delete the newly inserted discuss legally binding instrument. We feel it is more reflecting the reality, Mr. Chairman.
But there was a discussion of not going to a legally binding instrument, and I recall there was support for that. So if we add the word or, then I think we capture better the discussion. Do you agree? Again, we're not debating the merit of what was said. We only are including what was said. It's good? Thank you. We're going to the last sentence now. For example, the harmonization and then the words error and convergence were deleted or proposed to be deleted. Of the regulatory regimes at the global level was not supported. Are there any comments with respect to those proposed changes in the last sentence? Singapore?
Yes, I repeat my last comment that we suggest to delete, for example.
Are there any objections to this proposal? Okay, it's adopted. This closes paragraph 32.25. Are there any comments on paragraphs 32.26 to 32.29? ACI, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would like to make this intervention in relation to paragraph 32.27. The report ignores that working paper 275 introduces a new industry-led governance of the slot allocation regime at a global level. An important outcome in the field of slot allocation since the last assembly is that the legitimate interest of airports as much as airlines is taken into account to make sure that slots are used in the most efficient way possible. This has been the driver of the reform of the governance of the Worldwide Slot Guidelines, WSG. This will soon be renamed Worldwide Airport Slot Guidelines, WASG, and will serve as the least common denominator for the aviation stakeholders to allocate airport slots. We would like this to be reflected in the report as follows, inserting the last sentence of paragraph 32.27, information paper WP 275, prepared by ACI, the International Air Transport Association, IATA, and the Worldwide Airport Coordination Group, WWACG, reported on the progress made regarding their joint information paper, reported on the progress made regarding their joint strategic review of the Worldwide Slot Guidelines, WSG. Then we strike out which is meant to be finalized by the end of 2019 and add the following, and on the reform of its governance that now includes on an equal basis airport operators, airlines, and facilitators/slot coordinators. The paper informed that it, strike out the review, would result in a significant evolution of the WSG to keep pace with the rapidly evolving aviation industry.
Thank you. Did you send that new wording for the previous sentence to the Secretariat? Yes?
Yes, we did.
20 minutes before, so we could.
Okay. That's fine. But do we have to?
Yes, we are just typing.
Okay. Are there any objections to this new language proposed by ACI? No? Any other comments on this working paper? No? This closes the discussion on working paper 579. We're now moving to working paper 580, item 33. Are there any comments on paragraphs from 33.1 to 33.8? Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one small but looks like really important addition to paragraph 33.3. Actually, it was during the discussion and in the paper itself. In paragraph para 2.4 of the working paper, it was mentioned that the examples of Ukraine and European Union in the funding practices are in accordance with the ICAO policies. So just a small addition there, and actually it was mentioned by the Polish colleagues during the intervention that the user charges approach is something that has the place to be. And we discussed that and feel confident and would like to propose to add this sentence at the end, to add with the following: in accordance with such policy, giving reference to the beginning of the sentence where we mention the ICAO existing policy and guidance material.
So sorry.
In accordance with such policy.
So that would be the beginning of the second sentence in the paragraph? Where do you want these new this new language?
Yeah, this is correct. And then
so before we say the paper highlighted ICAO's existing policy, we would add the language that you're going to read.
Sorry, I didn't hear well. Oh, I thought you saw. Yeah, this is how I thought.
Okay.
And then in the parentheses in the brackets at the end, then after the policies, then we can put as an example such as the user charges approach, giving reference to what was voiced by Polish colleagues, and actually what we mentioned in the paper.
Okay. We'll try to capture that.
User charges. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
This is what you want?
This is all that I wanted to add.
Okay. United States, you have comments about this very point? No? I'll come back to you. Poland?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. I just would like to strong support this, what an Ukrainian just said before. This user charge approach is very appropriate in that place, and it should be like this. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any objections to this new language proposed by Ukraine and supported by Poland? No? Okay, so it's adopted. United States, you have a comment or a comment?
Yes, and I apologize for making us jump around, but we went from agenda item 32 to 33 so quickly that I didn't have a chance to intervene. And I wanted to point out that 33.10 of Working Paper 580 addresses an agenda item 32 working paper, and it really should be moved to agenda item 32. We began day 2 with Japan introducing its information paper, which is unusual, and there was very, very brief discussion because it really was not appropriate for floor discussion. So I suggest that we move paragraph 3310 to the report on agenda item 32 as part of 3229.
Okay. We'll come back to that when we get there. See if you want to hold that thought. Moving to 33.9. This is a suggestion language from the chair. Are there any comments or position? No? It's good? Okay. 33.10 now. So we have the proposal from the US to move this paragraph to the previous working paper, and Japan wants to take the floor. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. When I read this proposed text, I thought I misunderstood the conclusion of the discussion at the meeting, because even we use the information paper, but Japan asked the floor for permission to introduce the paper, and that is the kind of motion made by Japan using an information paper. And also that motion was supported by 2 states. And only 1 state opposed, simply because the information paper is information paper. But in accordance with standing rule of assembly, Doc 7600, for example, Rule 38, a motion shall not be discussed until it has been seconded. So the 1 state comment was not supported. So I thought that the motion made by Japan was supported by the Commission, but I might misunderstood how the Commission support the motion of Japan. So I would like to ask you to clarify the Commission whether the motion by Japan were supported or not. So, and then yeah. So first, I would like to ask the chair to do it. Thank you.
Okay. And may I also ask Japan as to its view regarding the placement of this paragraph? United States proposed to move it to the previous paragraph. It's true that the topic was related to item 32, although we discussed it at the beginning of item 33. So do you have a strong view as to where the paragraph should be located?
I'm sorry. No, I don't have any objection to move to 32, but I object, conclusion in the last sentence that. So I think that the motion presented by Japan was supported, but so I think that I want to repeat again. So still, I'm ambiguous the conclusion. So probably the Commission might not support or might support. So I would like to ask the Commission to clarify the conclusion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your patience. So my recollection of this part of the meeting was that at the beginning, Japan requested the floor for a brief intervention related to an information paper, which I granted as the chairperson under some conditions, i.e. that it would be a short presentation. My recollection was that the two states that supported or expressed support for the matter to be referred to the ATRP. And one state, the United States, intervened to indicate that the matter should not be discussed, given that it was raised in an information paper. So my first question to the US is that, is this an accurate recollection of your intervention?
Not entirely. There were two parts to my intervention. One was that it was far premature to refer this matter to ATRP. The other was that it was not appropriate to discuss it because it was an information paper.
Okay. As for the two states that supported Japan, Austria and Canada, is this an accurate description of your intervention, that you provided support for referring the matter to the ATRP? Yes? Canada, yes? Okay.
Yes.
So with that in mind, we're going to play with the wording of this paragraph, and we'll show it on the screen. So we'll show you the new text on the screen. So basically it's the end of the paragraph, which now reads, some states supported the suggestion to refer the matter to the ATRP, while one state was of the view that this matter was premature to discuss in the ATRP and should not be raised in this meeting because it was presented in an information paper. So Canada, you want to intervene? No? Any comments? Japan?
So I cannot see the conclusion of this, the motion. I didn't see in the text that it described the discussions, but what is the conclusion? Whether the motion by Japan, seconded by two states, are supported by the Commission, or the majority of the commission didn't support. So I think it should describe whether or not. Thank you. Because this is, of course, using information, but this is a motion in accordance with the standing rule of assembly. So it should be treated as a proper motion. Thank you.
Japan, you have the floor.
Yeah, I don't want waste time for this very precious time of this commission. So I just humbly advise you, because we are now in the reviewing the report phase, but still this commission has a capacity to decide. So you just simply ask the commission whether or not to support, and if commission doesn't support, you just say the motion from commission Japan was not supported. So that, this is very simple. Thank you.
Yes. But I don't think we are able to conclude along those lines, because Japan requested the floor on an exceptional basis to very briefly present an information paper, and I acquiesced to that request as the chairperson. The support of the other two states, did not second a motion. They intervened at the end to indicate support with the notion of the ATRP, or referring the issue to the ATRP. That's what both states supported, and they confirmed this a few minutes ago. And another state indicated that it should not go to the RTRP, but also that as an information paper should not have been raised. Now, this was my decision as the chair to allow you to do that. Given that, what we can say is the Commission noted, but we're not able to, we can't go back in time and reopen that discussion. My view is that there was not a formal motion along those lines, and certainly the two states that indicated support were supporting the notion of sending the topic to the ETRP. They were not seconding a motion. So what I propose is that we, just like we're doing for in information papers, the commission notes or noted the discussion, But in this case, there is a little bit more information about what was discussed. Australia?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, correct. There's 1,000 information papers here and none of them have made their way into a resolution. So I'm sorry, Japan. However, it is a free country, a free nation, and if Japan wants to raise these matters to the panel, I'm sure they can. But I would note that what Japan has actually asked for almost amounts to seeking legal advice from ICAO about Article 7 and Article 8. So whether the panel can actually help them with those questions is another matter. But, Chair, I think we need to move on, and I agree with your summation.
Thank you. Any other comments from other delegates? I have France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, sir. I support the colleagues made by my Australian colleague and your summary of the issue. It's quite clear. There's no motion that doesn't fit with our rules of procedure. I also support the proposal put forward by the U.S. to transfer or to move 1310 back into 32, the previous working paper. It would fit better there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Merci la France. So I have a proposal from the US and France to move this paragraph to the previous report. Japan indicates no objection to doing that, so that will be done. Okay? Thank you. And I believe this concludes the discussion on working paper 580. Thank you. We're now moving to working paper 602. Are there any comments with respect to paragraphs 34.1 to 34.7? Austria.
Thank you, Chair. I have just a comment on point 34.7. I had the impression that there were more than some states supporting the fact that the data tool, the ICAO data tool, should be available to member states on a cost-free basis. Therefore, I would propose to change some to many. Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree with that. I do recall a lot of support. Any comments on 34.8? The addition from the Secretariat at the request of the Chair was to reflect an intervention from IATA. Are there any comments? IATA?
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's the first time I'm seeing the text. I think the content looks right, but there might be some minor wording issues. So once I see this in offline, I'll make those comments. But I think the substance captures the remark I made.
Okay. Can I then suggest that you send those tweaks to the Secretariat in an email? Assuming they will not change the substance of the sentence. Do you agree?
Yes. The only, I mean, it's a minor logistical point, and apologies because I've not been in this committee before. But as I don't have this version as it is, I can't change it. But we can do it after the meeting. I think it's very quick.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Any comments on 34.9? This was an addition by the Secretariat at the request of the Chair to better capture an intervention from the US and Australia. US?
Yes, thank you. And I had said that if this notion of vetting was added, that the U.S. would be satisfied, and I had said yes. But now that I see it here, I think there needs to be a bit more substance to reflect the intervention, which I can email. But it would read, in this regard, a view was expressed that the accuracy of the estimated result of the direct economic impact should be validated specifically by vetting the framework with aviation stakeholder experts using aviation-specific data to measure the economic impact of aviation in countries where aviation-specific data is available.
Mr. Chairman, could you ask the representative to reread at a slower pace, please?
This promptly by email. It was specifically by vetting the framework with aviation stakeholder experts using aviation-specific data to measure the economic impact of aviation in countries where aviation-specific data is available. And this was supposed to happen, according to the intervention I made, before it was presented to the Air Transport Committee. So if, with your permission, I would like to email this promptly.
Thank you. That would be appreciated. I take this as mostly a clarification of what is written on this document. Do I have the agreement of the floor to let the U.S. send its preferred language to the Secretariat for Inclusion, Australia?
I just have a small piece of advice for my dear American colleague. That sentence had 6 aviations in it, I think, so maybe we could knock a few of them off. Thank you.
I believe there is an expression in English, less is more. This may guide the delegate from the U.S. Okay, so the Secretary will await your proposed text, and this concludes the review of Working Paper 602. Thank you. We now move to Working Paper 610. Item 35. Are there any comments with respect to paragraphs 35.1 to 35.7? Sorry, 35.8. Thank you. Moving to the next section, and for your benefit, when language is in gray shading, it's because it was newly added or added after the discussion based on the discussion. And later on we have language in track changes. That's because we received input afterwards from some of the delegates. I recall some of them had a bit of homework to do, and this is the result of this homework. So the second paragraph of the preamble has a new word, sustainable. Any comments on this? Thank you. The sixth paragraph has also new language at the end of the sentence. Are there any comments? Thank you. We now move to the next section. Are there any comments with respect to paragraphs 1 to 12? Thank you. Now moving on to section 1. Second paragraph of the preamble has new language. Are there any comments? United Arab Emirates?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In Appendix A, Section 1, page A3.5, the United Arab Emirates proposed for the original drafting to be retained to maintain a high level ambitious to develop an ambitious multilateral agreement in the future. Additionally, there are tangible benefits associated with market access as they are not just potential benefits. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Your intervention relates to the 5th paragraph. Is this correct? Okay. Just to close on the second paragraph, any comments? No? Okay. Now we go to the 5th paragraph with proposed language by European states and United States. So it would now read, whereas there is a need to build further understanding of the challenges and potential benefits associated with market access liberalization, comma, both in terms of passengers and cargo services. End of the paragraph. Apologies for the United Arab Emirates. Can you please repeat the proposed change that you want to make to this paragraph?
Mr. Chairman, just to retain and maintain the drafting before, the original draftings, to maintain a high-level ambitious to develop an ambitious multilateral agreement in the futures. Additionally, there are tangible benefits associated with market access as they are not just potential, they are benefits, Your Excellency.
So essentially you want to keep the words ambitious. Do you have any problems with the rest of the paragraph? Is this the essence of your intervention, that you want to keep the notion of an ambitious project? Yes? So the key word you want to keep is ambitious. Yes? So if, and I'm addressing the United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates, if in order to try to capture your point, if the adjective ambitious was added before market access liberalization, would this achieve the purpose? Yes. So that's what I'd like to discuss then. The addition of the adjective ambitious before market access. Are there any comments?
Potential.
United Arab Emirates. Sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, can we remove potentials also?
Potential?
Yes.
So the UAE proposes to remove potential and to add ambitious. Are there any comments on this proposal? I have Germany.
Thank you, Chair. I think there hasn't been a consensus on the scope of future agreement in the ATRP and not in the last discussions, so I suggest not to include ambitious.
Okay. Guyana?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to understand the rationale for deleting the words maintain the momentum. It sends a different meaning as compared to build further understanding. Ghana would like to see the words maintain the momentum, which means to continue with the pace that we are and to build further understanding. Thank you.
Well, for those who were in the ATRP and also taking into account subsequent decisions of the panel and the ETC, the work on developing a multilateral agreement on market access and air cargo has been finished, terminated. The focus now is on building understanding of liberalization. So I'm concerned that if we keep maintain the momentum, it's not in keeping with those decisions. So I open the floor for comments regarding the removal of the adjective potential and the addition of the adjective ambitious. Are there any comments? United States.
I agree with Germany. There's been no consensus on what the term ambitious means, so it's really useless to add it back in.
Any other comments? Australia.
Yes, as someone who has had the pleasure of being on that panel, Chair, I'm afraid you have summarised the position correctly. So I'm afraid ambitious does not work.
Okay. As a chair, I would agree with that view because I do have the benefit of having participated and witnessed those discussions. However, we still have to decide on the potential. To me, adding potential does not add a whole lot to the sentence. Benefits are not either cast in stone or very definite anyway, so I don't think we need potential. Are there any strong objections to this view? No? Okay. We will delete potential and we will not add ambitious. Thank you very much. So this concludes our review of the preamble. Are there any comments? Oh, I'm sorry. The very last paragraph of the preamble has new language, national or regional. Are there any objections? United Arab Emirates?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just regarding the paragraph on section point 5 again, can we clarify our position again and send a new statement to the Secretarial?
This could be a bit problematic because I sense there is a lot of strong views one way or the other about the meaning of ambitious. So I think this would be more than just a technical tweak to the paragraph. So I prefer to close that paragraph now. So, okay. Are any comments with respect to the addition of national or regional in the last paragraph of the preamble? No? Any comments with respect to paragraphs 1 to 8? Very well. Paragraph 9. This is a change that was requested by ACI. And I do recall that we, I think, the Secretariat and myself proposed this language. It seemed to have received the approval of the floor when we talked about it, so I just want to confirm that this is still the case. Are there any comments with respect to paragraph 9? No, thank you very much. Now moving to paragraph 10, we have proposed language from, or changes to new language from the European states and United States. I believe these two groups, or this is the result of their homework. Are there any comments from other delegates with respect to this paragraph? Ayata?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to reiterate the comments that I made in the discussion of this item in the first meeting, which is where the term compatibility is used to clarify compatibility with what. We've already had the discussion around the words harmonization and convergence, and they've been struck down. The compatibility term, I think, as written, is somewhat vague, and if it is to be remain, it should at least hint compatibility with the core principles themselves and with any other instruments such as MC99 that reflect those core principles. Thank you.
So Yetta proposes to clarify the use of the term compatibility by specifically mentioning the core principles that the ATRP produced, as well as the Montreal Convention 99. Are there any views on this proposal? US.
Thinking out loud, I don't know that we want to endorse long-term compatibility with the core principles, given that states are encouraged now to implement the core principles. So I find that a bit awkward.
I do have a proposal. I take your point. If we mentioned could help encourage compatibility with the ICAO core principles and the Montreal Convention 99 in the long term? Meaning that the compatibility will occur in the long term? I'll give you a few minutes to reflect on that. Are there any objections to my proposed wording? I'm looking at Yatta. Looks good. United States? It's on the screen now. La France?
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour cette proposition, mais je...
Thank you very much for that proposal, sir. I think it's going to lead to confusion, I beg your pardon. If we start talking about compatibility with ICAO core principles in the Montreal Convention, I'm wondering whether the idea behind it was not somewhat different. I mean, oftentimes we are reminded that there are certain core principles that we're all following, and that the overlapping issue, for example, is one that comes to mind. It's this type of thing that we should try to get into over time, but it's not obvious. And so that's why we say at the end of this sentence, we need to take into account the needs of states for flexibility given their specific social, political, and economic characteristics. But I think we have to take into account our core principles. That's pretty clear. And policies already exist at the global level, so that's important. So we need to be careful as to how we get into it, but that's what we're talking about here. So go back to the core principles. I think the U.S. has already said that states are already applying them and encouraging other states to do so, and that's in paragraph 9. So I don't think it's really necessary to stress this here. On the contrary. Anyway, I'll think about it a bit further. Okay, so your point of view is that when we talk about compatibility, we're talking about compatibility amongst national regimes. Yes, I think it's more to do with that, actually.
Align with the traditional position of IATA to reduce the differences between national regimes. Go ahead, Jetta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think to respond to the comment from the French delegate, that's true that reducing overlaps and confusion is important to both airlines and passengers. At the same time, I think we need to make sure that any compatibility remains bedded to the core principles, as I've sort of keep on repeating. So I think, just to reiterate my point, I think this paragraph could live without any mention of compatibility and stop at good practices, full stop. But if it is to carry on to have a mention of compatibility, that does need to be anchored in something.
Do you agree that there would be compatibility among national regimes to reduce differences and overlaps? I'm just trying to get an agreement on what we're trying to say here, and I can then wordsmith with the Secretariat afterwards, but at least I need a common view or common understanding of the point we're trying to make here.
I think one of the problems with the lack of compatibility between certain different regimes is precisely that they diverge from the core principles. So, you know, I think if we bring back the notion of the core principles as, if you like, the bedrock, that would automatically, I think, and naturally lead to the latter conclusion of the compatibility between the regimes narrowing.
Okay. Okay, the notion would be that compatibility would be across the national regimes, but the ICAO principles would serve as a guide or a I can't find the right verb or but the point of inspiration will come from the core principles. Like this is the light that all countries should aim for. But the compatibility would be across national regimes. Is this clear enough for the floor to digest? And I would propose that I work with the Secretariat afterwards to find out the right way to express the notion, but the notion would be along those lines. So we would talk about national regimes, and I think that's what IATA raises as a problem. There are too many differences, and it's very difficult to abide by all of them because of their differences. So it's something that should be reduced over time. And we would also mention the ICAO core principles as the guiding principles. So I'm looking at some faces. Some people are... Do I get the floor? Germany, go ahead.
Why not keep it simple and include principles on consumer protection as the core principles and make a full stop after good practices?
So you would simply end the sentence after good practices? Again, less is more? Are there any objections to that proposal from Germany? La France?
I think that my German colleague's remark was very sensible, but I'd like to know your proposal, which also seemed to be quite interesting. Once again, there's a difficulty in understanding each other, but the idea is to also serve the industry at the same time as the consumer. So I'd like to be able to keep all things on our side to work that way.
So the Secretariat proposed language, I'll read it as they type it on the screen. So share experiences and good practices as this effort could help encourage long-term compatibility among national or regional regimes, because some regions have the same regime, so national or regional regimes as guided by the ICAO core principles, comma, taking into account the needs of states, etc. So we'll just finish to type this on the screen and then I'll give the floor to the UK. United Kingdom, please.
Thank you. I was going to suggest a drafting solution, but it's not that different to yours. It could talk about sharing experiences and good practice, which, guided by ICAO's core principles, could help encourage long-term compatibility, which seems to cover both points. But I mean, both points seem equally valid. But when we talk about the core principles, almost in the same breath in this section, we're also then recognizing the the differences that exist and the need to accommodate those differences. Thank you.
So if we moved up the reference to the ICAO core principles, would this be in line with your proposal? Yes, thank you. Are there any comments, last comments with respect to this, hopefully last wording? I have United States.
I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we all agreed that the core principles should remain high level and non-binding. And I want another minute to please look at this language, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Very well. But we can, in the meantime, we can add the full formal title of the principles, which do include the terms non-binding and high level. Australia?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Australia, as you know, is very much into concise drafting, and putting core principles next to each other in about 7 words doesn't really read that well. Could we suggest something like this? Request the Council to strongly support the exchange of views and good practices, let's put that together right there, on the application of the ICAO core principles on consumer protection. Full stop. We don't need in an appropriate forum or that sort of gumph. Sorry, interpreters, gumph means rubbish. And then go into, this would help encourage compatibility amongst national racial regimes, taking into account, just split it up into 2 short sentences. That's my suggestion, Chair.
Thank you. We'll take that under advisement, but I'm giving time for the floor to digest this language too, as well, as requested by the US. Sriya?
Thank you. I think that the compromise text you proposed was the best. Therefore, I'm in favor, and I would fully support your text, because I think the intervention made by my Australian colleague, I think it doesn't hurt when you mention that there is some platform where we can exchange views and good practices. Therefore, I would be in favor in keeping in an appropriate forum. And the intervention made by my UK colleague, guided by the ICAO principles, I think it's not necessary. It's too much. And I think the additional text among national or regional regimes makes sense, and it reflects exactly what we might or what we need here, and therefore I would support your proposal. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. On the proposal to have 2 sentences in the paragraph, I'm told by the Secretariat that it's better to have 1, because
just a custom.
As it is customary to do it this way. However, on keeping in an appropriate forum, to me it goes without saying that we would discuss it in appropriate forum. I can't see ICAO discussing it in an inappropriate forum. So I think we have a little bit of excess baggage with those words, if I can use that expression. So I'm all for simplifying the paragraph a bit. So not to continue to beat this to death. Is the paragraph now clear enough, and does it capture the points raised by particularly IATA and France and the UK? IATA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, in terms of the majority of the paragraph, I'm happy with the a number of the wording forms that have been suggested. However, we have now lost the link between the compatibility and the core principles, and I think that's a concern. It may seem a strange scenario, but you could get to a state where there are lots of national regimes that are compatible with each other, but not actually compatible with the core principles, and that would be not the objective, I think, of this exercise.
So we try to address the very last comment from IATA. Is this EU, please?
Sorry, thanks for giving me the floor. Just reading the sentence now, to me, if you're doing an exchange of views and good practices on the application of the principles, surely it's self-evident that that is your starting point, is the core principles. And therefore, to add the reference to being guided by the core principles just seems a little bit redundant to me, but that's just my reading of the sentence.
I would tend to agree with that comment. I think we're not losing the guiding light of the ICAO principles if they're mentioned earlier in the sentence. So let's remove it. Let's remove the second mention. And there are no other comments, so this paragraph is closed. Thank you very much. We will now look at paragraph 12. Again, the result of work from the European states and United States. Are there any comments? Singapore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I suggest that we clarify that we are looking at the development of a global multilateral approach because we don't want to preclude other multilateral approaches at the regional or sub-regional level.
So you want us to say global or multilateral approach?
I guess the clarification that we want to make is that at least at the ATRP, the discussions are revolving around a global multilateral approach under the auspices of ICAO. So we don't want to preclude by this sentence that to include the coverage of other multilateral agreements or multilateral processes that are outside of the ICAO process.
United Kingdom, please.
Thank you. I understand the point my friend from the Singapore is making, but surely in this context, multilateral effectively means anything other than bilateral. And we're not trying to prejudge the outcome of the deliberations here. We're requesting the Council to undertake further work to build understanding about the benefits and potential barriers to going down this path, with a view to further consideration being given to development of a multilateral approach. Also, I would point out, you know, although yes, the ATRP has at times talked about a global approach, nevertheless, the outcome is not something that would be imposed globally anyway. It would be a matter for individual states to choose whether or not they joined up. So I think global in this context is quite a misnomer and doesn't really fit the context. Thank you.
A global arrangement would obviously be multilateral, but a multilateral agreement may not necessarily be global, or at least the guidance material that ICAO would produce could be used for global if there were enough states, but otherwise it could be used by a region to set up a multilateral. So I prefer the term multilateral. I think it's more flexible. Any comments from Singapore? Can you live with multilateral? It does not preclude global, but go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess reading the sentence, we just feel that there are already multilateral agreements that are proceeding, and many of which are already implemented because parties to such multilateral agreements have already understood the benefits and challenges of liberalization. So this sentence may give the impression that such regional or sub-regional approaches do not exist, and whereas I think what the ATRP has been talking about is really a global agreement, because we know MALIAT exists, the ASEAN agreements exist. So when you say further consideration could be given to a development of a multilateral approach at an appropriate time, suggests that such multilateral approaches which are already implemented do not exist.
Yes, granted, but I think this paragraph relates to building a better understanding of the benefits and challenges of liberalization. And there's probably, it's not stated, but there's a target number of states for this paragraph. Obviously, those that have already concluded multilateral agreements presumably understand the benefits and challenges. Not all countries have done that. And I think the idea here is to help these countries understand better or have a better understanding. It does not preclude states from negotiating regional or sub-regional agreements, multilateral agreements. But I think that the gist of this paragraph is about building understanding, and it's the understanding of the benefits and challenges of a multilateral approach. So I think that's the focus of the paragraph. United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could make a small comment. This provision relates to an ICAO-developed instrument. At this point in time, there's no ICAO-developed instrument dealing with multilateral approach, such as being discussed in paragraph 12. So I would prefer that we do not speak to global, that we leave it as is. Thank you. In other words, I support your intervention, Chairman.
Thank you. And you're correct. This is about developing an ICAO instrument, taking into account that some states have done it already by themselves with their neighbors. So with that, I propose to close the discussion on this paragraph. Are there any last comments? Thank you. Moving to paragraph 13, there's new language at the end of the paragraph. Are any comments? Very well. Moving to section 2. Second to last paragraph. We just added the word "and," so we don't need to comment on that. Last paragraph is new. Are there any comments? Very well. Any comments on paragraphs 1 to 5? Very well. Paragraph 6, we have new language. Any comments? And I see no delegates wanting to take the floor. Very well. Oh, I'm sorry, United Kingdom.
It's a very pedantic point, Mr. Chairman, but surely it's the ICAO long-term vision for the liberalisation of international air transport.
Sorry, say that again.
You've got the title of the ICAO vision wrong.
Oh, okay, in paragraph 6.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. We'll fix that. Paragraph 7, any comments? Section 3, any comments on the preamble? Any comments on paragraphs 1 to 6? Any comments on section 4 in its entirety? Very well. Moving on to Appendix B. Any comments on the appendix as a whole? Thank you. Appendix C, Section 1. Any comments on Section 1 as a whole? Thank you. Any comments on Section 2? For the preamble of Section 2. ACI.
Merci, Président.
Thank you very much, sir. I have a comment on paragraph 5 of section 2. Well, I'll just be getting to that in a minute, if you can wait for a second.
Any comments on paragraphs 1 to 4 in this appendix? And now paragraph 5. Go ahead, DCI.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. We're a bit surprised to see the term elevating has been replaced by the term exploring the role of private sector, including infrastructure and airport infrastructure. In 2019, we're no longer exploring the role of the private sector. In most states represented here, the private sector is an active player, not only when it comes to finance, but also to management of airport infrastructure projects. if you take a look at the top world airports, more than half have some form or another of private capital participated in the financing or in the management of those facilities. So I think we should not replace elevating with exploring. Okay, actually, you know what? This is just an error by the Secretariat, so we're going to put elevating back in and take out exploring. Thank you, sir. Just an error on our part. Thank you.
Paragraph 6 to 7. Any comments? I'm sorry, Guyana?
Mr. Chair, I just want to refer to the elevating exploring issue. First of all, with clarity, it's not an error on the Secretariat's part. It was actually an intervention made by the UAE and well supported. There was no dissenting remarks to changing elevating to exploring. You can double check the record.
United Arab Emirates, can you please take the floor?
Thank you, Guyana. And I'm sorry, I was kind of otherwise engaged. I overlooked the discussion. Paragraph 5. Yes, to confirm that indeed we propose the replacement of elevating by exploring. Simple justification is that there are many kinds of economies and there are many kinds of different roles in terms of the private sector. And simply we thought that exploring would give a better and more balanced idea as to how the private sector would operate in aviation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That I just wanted to explain where this paragraph 5 came from. This is the same text taken from that other assembly working paper we already approved. So what we understood is when the commission approved the work program or the work plan in different working paper, then automatically approved the so-called suggested little a, b, c, d in that so-called work program, that paper. So I didn't remember correctly that working paper number, but then that this is reflected in that agenda item 33, paper number, working paper 17. The exact same text came from working paper 17. And this working paper 17 text, exactly same text, came from that declaration adopted in the third worldwide ICAO Aviation Forum, and also that the two communiques issued by World Aviation Forum, as well as a couple of the speeches made by our top management. Thank you so much.
The point of the Secretariat is that this language was taken from elsewhere and it's cast in stone. So United Arab Emirates, you want to add anything?
Okay, no. I was simply going to say that one could make a consequential change to the paper that is being quoted. But if you're saying that the language is cast in stone, then I take my hat off and let it finish there. Thank you.
Okay. So we therefore have to keep elevating. Moving to Appendix D, are there any comments with respect to the preamble? No, thank you. Any comments with respect to paragraphs 1 to 4? Thank you. Any comments with respect to section 1 of Appendix E in its entirety? Thank you. Moving on to section 2. Any comment with respect to the preamble? Thank you. Any comments with respect to paragraph 1 where we have new language, which I believe came from the United States, and also we had an editorial comment from Guyana? Any comments on this wording, paragraph 1? Very well, thank you. Any comments on paragraphs 2 to 4? Thank you. Any comments on section 3 as a whole? Argentina.
Sorry, sir. If we could just go back. When you talk about the term to finalize, the term in Spanish is incorrect. So we need to check that. That's all I'm bringing up at this point. Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you, Argentina.
Spanish version. El secretariado va a asegurarse que la
So the Secretariat will make sure that the Spanish version is rectified.
3 as a whole. So this concludes our discussion of working paper 610. Now moving on to 611. Any comments on paragraphs 36.1 to 36.8? Very well. Any comments on paragraph 36.9, where we had comments we received from the United States as well as Cuba? Any comments on 36.9? Thank you. Any comments on the rest of this working paper? Thank you very much. We have now concluded all the business of the Economic Commission. The reports of the Economic Commission reflecting corrections and revisions made today will be submitted to the plenary for adoption. Please do not forget to look at reference documents related to the work of the Economic Commission, which are published on the Assembly website. These reference materials will give you additional food for thoughts when you go back to your home countries. I would now ask Dr. Gibault, si vous avez un mot à ajouter.
Dr. Gibault, would you like to take the floor? Yes, thank you, sir. Well, on behalf of the entire team which served this commission, I would like to say thank you and also thank all members of the commission for your active participation. We've certainly taken note of some of the action to be carried out over the next triennium, and you've added your grain of salt to that. There are a number of issues, as you notice, that come back regularly, and some become more urgent depending on current events. So thank you very much for having attended, and hope you'll be able to join us in plenary. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Gibault.
Alors, j'aimerais remercier.
So I would like to thank all the Secretariat personnel for their impeccable support before, during, and after our meeting. I'd also like to thank the interpreters for their excellent work and their contribution to the success of our meeting. We've seemed to have arrived at our destination, and we're in fact ahead of time, and thank you very much for your collaboration. I would also like to say thank you to all the languages represented in this room. Unfortunately, I am not multilingual enough to do that, so I will just stick to the 6 ICAO languages.
Cheche, danke, obrigado, grazie, spasibo, arigato, tak. And have a safe travel back home. And it's been a pleasure to be your chair. Thank you very much. I think we all deserve a round of applause. Je crois que le délégué de la
I believe that the delegate from France would like to take the floor. Yes, I would, sir. Thank you very much. We're adjourning here, so I would like to thank the Secretariat and also thank you, sir, for having guided us, for all your hard work, your wisdom, your effectiveness in terms of guiding our discussions. And it wasn't all that simple a task, I might say, a lot of time constraints. So I would like to thank you for your work and safe travels.